There is diversity in human brains. We all know some people that are great at solving equations, while others that excel in making paintings or sculptures. Isaac Newton was brilliant at physics, but often struggled to express his ideas clearly in writing or in conversation. Think about it. Newton's laws explain a wide range of phenomena, from the motions of planets to the behavior of objects here on Earth. Yet when it came to personal relationships, Newton struggled. And he sometimes made bad decisions. In fact, he once invested in something called the South Sea Company, which lost like $8 million in today's money when it collapsed around the year 1720. Newton, while brilliant, had major shortcomings. Another example of this is Elon Musk. While no one can argue that he's pushed technology forward, he definitely hasn't done himself any favors in the stable personal relationships department. These are examples of people who are talented but not perfect, which brings me back to the importance of diverse brains. My name is Oliver Shorey, and although it may be surprising, I too am not perfect. I wish I were as brilliant as Newton, but I'm not that either. But I do have things that I love to learn about, sports I love to participate in, and activities that I enjoy in my spare time. And I'm not just talking about doom scrolling on Instagram Reels. Physics is my favorite subject. I love ski racing, and I love building Lego. Yes, Lego, the toy for nerds. But in fairness, I only do the stuff that's 18 plus, so maybe that gives me some street credit. Oh, and I'm a foot taller and have way more acne than when I started at Appleby in grade 9. Guess which one of those two things I'm actually happy about? Everyone's different. Some people are considered ugly, some are thought to be smart, and some look hairy. And some people are tall. Inevitably, some people are more successful, better looking, more mentally healthy, and smarter than others. And I'm sure, if you looked hard enough, you could find a person who is all of these things. But I haven't met a single person who could be considered perfect. This leads me to something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. Neurodiversity. I was diagnosed with a learning disability when I was in grade school, so I'm what some people call neurodiverse. Neurodiversity is a concept that helps to acknowledge that there are neurological differences. These differences can include things like dyslexia, ADHD, and even autism. It also helps us to understand that although there may be some disadvantages to being different, being neurodiverse can also have its advantages. Like although I may have trouble spelling, I enjoy thinking through challenging math and physics problems. To be honest, I'd never heard the word neurodiverse until the past couple of years here at Appleby. I just always thought that everyone had a different brain. And what I learned in my early school years was that my brain in particular set me apart. Struggling with handwriting and spelling is a major red flag to elementary schools. Like, I'm not saying that this happened to me, but let's just say one time a scrawny ginger kid was struggling to print his letters B and D, so the teacher had to tape them to his desk so he could differentiate. Kids walking by my desk had questions, and they weren't always super nice about it. It all started when I was in grade 1. My parents and teachers noticed that while I could put together Lego meant for 10-year-olds, I couldn't handwrite a full sentence. While the kids around me started writing paragraphs and stories, I still struggled to write my name at the top of the paper. And while I loved to read, I couldn't spell very well. And I still can't. Spelling just doesn't make sense to me. Like, for example, how is it logical that the sound shun in locomotion is spelled T-I-O-N? There should totally be an S in there, no? Not according to any of my English teachers. Or should because be spelled B-E-C-U-Z? That just makes sense. There are two things that take me a very long time to complete. The first is writing with a pen on paper, and the second is composing sentences. And don't even get me started on English essays, because I've been known to repeat the same thing over and over again in the same essay. Writing. I just really don't like it. It's like my brain doesn't understand the point or value in it. I'm so thankful for AI. It's been life-changing for me. Only, of course, within the confines of the Appleby Code of Conduct. The first thing that happens when teachers notice that you're struggling in a way that's different than most is you get sent for what's called a psych ed. It's the worst, both in what it's called and in what it actually is. It's 2 full days of testing. They use a bunch of different tests on you, and mostly ones named after people, like the Stanford for Binet or the Welshler Intelligence Scale, and something called the NEPSI. After those 2 full days of grueling tests, they give your parents a giant report that's supposed to lead to something called an IEP, or an individual education plan. For some of you, this stuff is old news, and for you, I apologize that I'm repeating it, but most of you will never be subjected to the Welshler or the NEPSI, and I am envious, let me tell you. After they write the report, they decide on whether or not you should get something called accommodations. Because I tend to mix up my letters and make silly errors, I get more time on tests so that I can review and hopefully not make those silly errors. On the other hand, the report also shows that I fall within the 95th percentile of working memory, so I remember things easily. Sorry, I forgot what I was supposed to say. Oh yeah, I have really good working memory. Having a good working memory also means that I'm decent at mental math and problem solving, so at least there's that. It helps me with challenging physics problems and figuring things out. Getting more time on tests also gives me time to check over my work, fix silly errors, and improve my written communication. But sometimes I get flack for it. People wonder why I get extra time and they don't. They think it's unfair, and I get it. Physics and math can be challenging, even if you don't have a learning challenge. And it probably seems even more unfair given that I do solve problems fairly easily sometimes. I guess it's unfair depending on how you look at it. But just because it can seem unfair doesn't mean that we shouldn't allow kids with learning challenges extra time to review their work. Which also makes me wonder, shouldn't everyone just get extra time on tests? Just because I mix up my B's and D's, why should that be the deciding factor? Is how fast you regurgitate information really that important? Imagine a physics test, normally designed to be completed in an hour. Now imagine all students were given 2 hours to complete it. Would that extra time really matter? Are you smarter because you can solve physics problems quickly? Or are you smarter if you can spend more time thinking through those problems and their solutions? I don't know. These are just questions that I like to think about. The one thing I do know for certain is that it would be a lot easier for me not to carry the weight of a learning disability label on my shoulders. I also know that even though I have an IEP and extra time, there are still teachers who ask me to correct my spelling, to take more time, and to just be more careful, which always makes me feel like screaming. But luckily, I can hold it in, which means I guess I'm okay at impulse control. Should have put that on my IEP. I find school subjects very different from one another. It's kind of interesting how we can take such a variety of classes. For example, physics demands what's called abstract thinking to understand fundamental laws and principles. It's a subject that asks us to mentally visualize complex scenarios or phenomena, which I'm happy to say I enjoy. Like imagine Schrodinger's thought experiment involving a cat in a sealed box with a radioactive atom. According to quantum mechanics, the cat is simultaneously alive and dead until someone observes it, which is the superposition of states. Picturing a cat existing in two contradictory states at once defies our everyday logic. On the other hand, other subjects require different ways of thinking. Like business class, it's all very practical and logical, it just makes sense. I'm happy to report that my writing has improved in the past 4 years. It still isn't great though. Just ask my English teachers who have encouraged me to review my spelling more than a couple times. All I can say is I will try. But as a 17-year-old who just learned how to spell the word science, I'm not making any promises, aside from trying to make small, maybe tiny improvements over time. Oh, and funny story, this summer I worked on a golf course, and I liked my job. I signed people in before their rounds of golf. But you can imagine me signing people in, trying to spell their last name? Not easy. One man came in and told me his last name was Smith, and me being me, I asked him how to spell it. He was more than a little annoyed because apparently everyone knows how to spell the last name Smith. So what's the point of this speech? The point is, I know I fall under the category of neurodiverse. But to be honest, I kind of feel like we're all neurodiverse, because everyone thinks differently. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy that I get extra time on tests to review and make sure I've done everything as correctly as I can. But part of me wonders if it should be a limiting factor for anyone on tests. I'm certain doing things quickly is an essential qualification for certain jobs, but should it be a restriction on tests? Shouldn't all test takers be provided with the time they need to finish said test? Or maybe teachers could set tests that allow for extra time. Thinking quickly is great for some jobs, and it can improve with training, but it's also overvalued in my opinion. Fast thinking was never something Einstein excelled at. In fact, he spent an entire year just thinking. This contemplative approach was a hallmark of Einstein's style throughout his life. For example, it took him 8 years from 1907 to 1915 to fully develop the equations for general relativity after first envisioning it in its core principles. Einstein often relied on extended periods of deep thought and mental contemplation to arrive at his revolutionary ideas. So when I'm mindlessly scrolling on my phone during study time and the duty teacher asks me what I'm doing, I could just say that I'm in deep thought like Einstein, right? I think the problem isn't that we have neurodiverse students. The problem is that the system doesn't allow for diverse thinking. We're all in such a rush to cover as many subjects as possible that we're missing out on allowing for the next level of thinking. Going in-depth on a subject takes so long, and we just don't seem to have the time for it. But I hope schools and teachers could consider the idea of slow contemplation more often. I'm not sure how it could be built into our curriculum, but I think it'd be interesting to try. Ultimately, the question I'm left with is how can we create a learning environment that celebrates diverse thinking styles and allows everyone to reach their full potential? Appleby has been a supportive environment for me and my learning style, and I hope that it has and will be for you. I hope that I've given you some insight into my experience and that we will continue to learn and grow as a community. Now will you please stand and sing hymn number 416.